Welcome back to Raff Talks. This is our monthly show where we try to cut through the noise and share some of the more interesting things happening in the defense sector.
And today, we've got a fascinating one. We're looking at a pretty significant strategic shift in West Africa.
Right, something we've been calling the Abidjan breakthrough. It all centers on a trip that happened just a couple months back in December 2025.
Exactly. We're analyzing Raff Military Textile's expansion into the Ivory Coast. Between December 14th and 18th, a series of meetings happened in Abidjan that I think signal a whole new approach for Turkey in the region.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. West Africa is a crowded market for defense contractors. I mean, you have major global players jostling for position there.
You do.
So why is this specific move by Raff worth a deep dive? Is this really about more than just, selling more uniforms?
It's definitely different, and that's mostly because the demand itself has changed. West Africa is facing, some very intense regional security pressures right now. So these nations, they aren't looking for off-the-shelf surplus anymore. They're accelerating their modernization programs.
That lines up with what we're seeing from Turkey's export numbers, right? 2025 was a historic high for their defense and aerospace sectors.
A huge year. But here's the key difference. Raff isn't just shipping crates. They're bringing a kind of logistical agility that the bigger, slower legacy contractors really struggle with.
That brings us to the how. You mentioned Raff has over 8 decades of experience, which is impressive, but history doesn't always equal speed. How are they actually moving faster?
It all comes down to vertical integration. This is the really interesting part. Most suppliers are just middlemen.
Right. They buy fabric from one place, dye it somewhere else.
Exactly. And then assemble it in a third location. Raff controls the entire chain, from selecting the raw cotton to the chemical color treatments, the cutting, the sewing, everything.
So wait, if a commander in the Ivory Coast says, hey, this fabric is too heavy for our rainy season, Raff doesn't have to call a supplier halfway across the world and wait 6 months.
That's it, precisely. They can just walk down to their own factory floor and change the weave. That ability to pivot in days, not months, is what I mean by logistical agility.
And that was the core of their mission in Abidjan.
It was. They weren't just showing off products. They were demonstrating that they can adapt to the environment in real time.
Speaking of the environment, let's talk about the gear itself. West African terrain is brutal on equipment. It's not just about looking the part, it has to be about heat management, right?
Precisely. The whole showcase was focused on environmental adaptation. They were presenting uniforms and protective gear engineered for high humidity and heat stress.
Which makes sense. If your soldiers are overheating because the fabric can't breathe, their cognitive function just plummets.
And that's the point they were making, showing decision makers how specific textile technologies can actually improve unit readiness. It's not just a piece of clothing at that point.
I also saw a note about firefighter equipment, so this wasn't limited to the military.
No, it wasn't. They included tools that meet strict international standards, which shows they're looking at the total security ecosystem. Military, police, and civil defense.
Okay, let's talk about the who. A breakthrough like this implies some pretty high-level access. They weren't just handing out flyers at a trade show.
Not at all. This is where the strategy gets really interesting. They used a two-pronged approach.
Go on.
First, you have the institutional side. They had strategic exchanges with the commercial counselor at the Turkish embassy and the vice president of the Turkey Exporters Assembly.
So the high-level economic diplomacy.
Yeah.
Figuring out the macro stuff like bypassing shipping bottlenecks.
Yes, but that doesn't tell you if a boot fits.
True.
Which is why the second prong was so important. They went straight to the end users. They had direct one-on-one talks with officials from the National Police and the Armed Forces of Côte d'Ivoire.
So they basically ask, what's failing in your current kit?
And then offered to engineer a solution on the spot. That's a rare thing. Usually there are 3 layers of procurement officers between the manufacturer and the actual soldier.
And they didn't stop there. They also met with major private security firms in the region. It's a very comprehensive strategy.
It is. The feedback we're seeing suggests that West African leaders are tired of the old ship it and forget it model. They want partners who are going to stick around.
So the big takeaway here for anyone watching the defense space is that the era of simple transactional trade might be fading. It really sounds like Raff is building long-term economic connections, not just a sales route.
That's the heart of it. It's a purposeful expansion, one built on trust and, speed.
It really makes you wonder, if a textile manufacturer can forge this kind of diplomatic depth, are we going to see more private companies becoming the new diplomats in emerging markets? It's something to think about.
It certainly is.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. For our listeners, make sure you stay connected for future updates on defense innovations. There's always more happening on this front. Thanks for listening to Raff Talks.